you all know me already. So I recently was able to have the opportunity to integrate Facebook into a social website of its own, which was an experience because I haven't worked with Facebook since fresh out of college in like 2009, so a lot's changed. But what I want to talk about is first how to initialize Facebook, the Facebook JavaScript SDK in your Ember app so that you can leverage it. And then we'll go through the send dialog component, which uses the JavaScript SDK only through Ember. So there's like no server interaction whatsoever. And then I'll talk about an authenticate component, which is going to be a little bit more in-depth. So just a preamble. I'm not a Facebook expert. I'm really not sure who is. If you know someone, let me know. Maybe if you know someone that works at Facebook on the API team, they might be an expert, maybe. But they have so much that they have to support. The documentation has gotten significantly better, so at least you can like read and figure it out. But such is the case when you're working with a giant corporation with tons of users to support with their public API. So when I was working on this Facebook stuff for the first time in a while, not necessarily the like JavaScript SDK, but the authentication part for sure. There were a couple times where I was like, wait, why? What? And the reason is just because Facebook. The other thing is when you're interacting with an API, a third-party API like Facebook, or maybe some other big one like Twitter or what have you, you're completely at the control of that third party. So they can choose to just change how they do things, and then your app just doesn't work. So that's why a lot of people try to stay away from integrating with third-party services too much. There is use, though, in leveraging such a large social network such as Facebook or Twitter, though, for your own site to grow it. So it's a trade-off. There's some setup involved no matter what. If you want to start working with Facebook, you have to go and create an app, you have to have a developer account, there's some stuff that you have to set up, but the important things that you're going to need from this is the app ID and the app secret. And then you'll have to go and create your Ember app with Ember CLI. It's really easy. And then we can finally start talking about initializing the Facebook JavaScript SDK into your brand new app. I did a post on this, so the link's in the slides. The slides are posted on my website. The blog post that I did was only on initializing the JavaScript SDK. It wasn't actually on all the other stuff in here, but because I've done it since. So initializing is done in an initializer in your Ember app, and the initializers are run to kind of prep your app. So any kind of like if you need to inject your sessions, which we just talked about in the last talk, or set up your Google Analytics, or any other third-party SDKs you might be interacting with, you have to initialize them with whatever you have. Those would all be examples of when you'd use an initializer. Basically, you don't want your app to start going until all these steps have been done. And it's really simple to write an initializer. Almost everything that you see here, except for my app ID, was taken. Everything inside the initialize function, which is called on the initializer, which is executed on the initializer, is taken from the Facebook docs. And I haven't changed anything. It's just initializing this global FB, which we're going to use in our other components throughout the Ember app to access the API methods and the JavaScript SDK UI methods as well. So that's step one. Are there any questions about that? That was pretty straightforward. Just setting it up. Okay, so then we have.
I was wondering how to do that the other day.
Were you?
So,
yeah. Initializers are cool. All right, so the next part is the send dialog component. You used to also, I wish that you could still like request friends through Facebook UI, but you can't anymore. So I'm going to use send dialog as an example. This allows you to send a message to any of your friends on Facebook. And so I would have something like this Facebook invite button, or maybe message with Facebook button, depends on your scenario. and you would get a pop-up, and depending on if you have a session with Facebook in your browser currently or not, it'll detect that you're logged in or not, and this is all handled by the Facebook SDK, so you don't have to worry about coding any of this. If you're not logged into Facebook currently, it'll prompt you to log in, and then you'll get this pop-up that says send a message, and whatever the content is, that's what we're going to worry about in our Ember app, is what content do we want to send to this user's friends. And it's as simple as this. Ember components are made up of the JavaScript file, which is on the top, and then a template file. For the authenticate, which we're going to talk about later, I don't even have a template file. So sometimes you don't even need a template file. But here, all I'm doing is creating this action for the component to use called invite, which is just calling the Facebook UI with the URL that I want to share right here. And you pass that in when you call the component. And that's it. So that's pretty simple. Any questions? Super easy. I think there's a lot of the other Facebook UI methods that are available are specifically for Canvas applications, and Canvas applications mean that you have like an actual like Flash game on Facebook or something. It's not like a website, so that's why there really isn't much more to cover except send dialogue. I think there's share also, but it's pretty much the same thing. It's just instead of Facebook.ui method send, I think it's like share or something. And then the big one. So I guess my talk's gonna be a lot shorter than I thought. That's okay. So for authenticating, and this one's a little fuzzy for me still, but you'll have, sign up with Facebook or sign in with Facebook and you want to authenticate. So again, like depending on if you're logged in or not, the Facebook JavaScript SDK is going to manage that for you and prompt you with permission request. If you've already logged in and given permissions, then we want the user just to go straight through to our app. So you would see something like this. And then this is kind of abbreviated from the Facebook docs, but these are the steps for you if you want to use the JavaScript SDK and then also your own like server-side stuff and request a long-term token, basically, which is what we're going to do, or what I had to do. And so it says, step 1, check the login status to see if the user's logged in already in their browser to Facebook. If they're not logged in, then prompt them to log in and ask for the permissions. Verify their identity, store the resulting access token. Now you can make API calls willy-nilly to Facebook, and then handling logout. Well, I don't really handle logout, so. This is my component. It's really, really long, so I'm just going to step through it one piece by one piece. Basically, I've taken all these different steps and put them in their own methods. They're all promises. And then there's this like entry point, which is the action, which is called on the component when you click it, and it chains all of these together so that you do the proper ordering of steps, and finally would return to whatever the success method is. So here's a close-up of that. So this is similar to what we just saw. So get login status, get access token, authenticate, and then send action success and pass the user. And then, if there's failure, send action failure. So we want the component to be compartmentalized. So we're just saying all this component is handling is the Facebook authentication. Once we've authenticated and we have the user, we're just going to hand it off to the rest of the app. The component itself doesn't care what you do with that user. So that's why we're sending this action off. And then a different part of the app is going to take care of it. The component itself isn't.
Just using Facebook as the login screen, essentially.
Yeah.
And once they say they log in, would we do your own authentication?
Kind of. I'll step through it a little bit in more detail.
You don't keep going back to Facebook?
No. Yeah, no. Once we have the access token, then we're good to go. If they're not logged in, though, we would have to have them log into Facebook so that we can check that they That's something we have to do. So I have to, so you'll see. So we're gonna go through the steps. So the first step is checking the login status to see if they're logged in or not. And that's right here. So this is pretty simple when you like separate it into promises. So I've wrapped this Facebook method in an Ember RSVP promise, which is just a promise library. And this is just so that I could simplify the component and how it was laid out, because otherwise it would have just been a big mess of, like, what is it called? The pyramid of doom with a bunch of Facebook methods and callbacks. So I didn't want that, so I wanted to break it up into promises, and it's easy enough to do. So we're just calling get login status. We handle the status. This will come back as like unknown if they're not logged in, authorized if they are logged in and they have already authorized the app, and then something else for not authorized. Maybe it's not authorized. So we resolve the status and we reject otherwise. If they're not logged in, invoke the login dialog and ask for a set of data permissions.
Facebook's login, but not.
Yeah, we're not calling my own. Once we get the access token from Facebook, we're going to hand it off to our API, and then our API, the library that I'm using for authentication, is going to go out to Facebook on its own. So the server side is going to be like, okay, give me a long-term token. Because when we're using the Facebook JavaScript Sdk, we get these short-lived tokens that are about 1 or 2 hours, but you can never be, it's not reliable. So the token could just like die.
So you do a little bit of front end.
And then the back end gets a long-term one. And that way, like, we have a token on the back end so we can do publish actions, so we can post up to people's walls, and so we can interact if we have the permission to do that, if we ask for it.
Yeah. Is it called the wall?
No, yeah, I guess it's not, right? Timeline? No more wall.
Oh, man.
So I actually, here's another funny thing. I didn't have a Facebook. I now have one just for development, but like I stopped using Facebook maybe a year ago, so it's been a while for me. So getting back on, I'm like, I don't even use Facebook. It's like, you have an activity log now, and you have like your timeline, so it was a learning Nice. Yeah, it was a learning experience. And then even though I used like a development account, like a development email, somehow all my friends found me. Like they were like, oh, you have a Facebook again. I'm like, no, don't add me. This is just a development account. I'm not using this personally. I won't accept your friend request. You will be denied. So anyway, if they're not logged in, invoke the login dialog and ask for the permissions. Here we are going to, here's where we get the access token from Facebook, where we're going to call the Facebook.login, and we get this auth response. All we care about is the access token if we get it, and so we're going to pass that off. And at the bottom, you can see the scope where this app that I was writing specifically needed the email and the user's birthday and publish actions.
I have a question about this. So if you were to not ask for the publish actions up front, let's say you just ask for email, would you then need to go to get another access token with publish actions and send that to your API again?
You would have to prompt for permissions again,
Okay.
and then
Would it be the same method, this Facebook.login method, or would it be a different method? Depending on the method you just asked for?
I think it would be this one.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not an expert on Facebook, so it's a good
You
question.
said that.
I know, I'm going to keep saying it because this is like the first big thing with
'Cause
Facebook.
I've always wondered about that. Like, I know at some point I'm going to ask for publish actions, and I don't want to ask for it as the first thing that I do.
Because you think it'll scare them off. Yeah, so that's why, so we asked for publish actions right up front, but it's not required to continue. So let me go back. Remember when you click sign up, let's say this button sign up with Facebook is on my application, and you click it, it's gonna open up and ask you to log into Facebook, and then it's gonna say, okay, this app wants, I don't know if you've ever used an app, but yeah, this app wants access, and here's what they want access to.
Yeah, I'll get a list of
You'll get
the
something
benefits.
here with like all the permissions that they're requesting. So in our case, we require email. If the user says no to email, we don't authenticate. We pop up a little intercom like with our system message thing, and it says, sorry, you must not have given us the correct permissions. Please try giving us the correct permissions before you can continue, because we require an email.
And if you don't have the publish actions, like do you handle that like API level? Is there some way that you know that if you don't have publish actions for that person?
Yes.
Publish actions, things that you want to publish to Facebook.
Yeah, so that's like maybe.
That's a valid point. So right now, no, it just tries, and we just let it fail.
Okay.
But to be honest, I probably should keep track of that,
Okay.
because otherwise I'm making unnecessary network requests.
Right.
So
I mean, that's
a
always been
valid
the big concern that I've had is like, should I even show the ability to like share this thing on Facebook if they're not actually authenticated, or should I like try and get that authenticated?
Mhm. Yeah, so that's the other thing with Facebook. It's like it opens up this whole can of like logic that needs to be added and all these different conditions. Like, okay, what if the token? So even the long-term tokens expire after 60 days, or about 60 days. It could be shorter, whatever. And then you like to think that the library you're using is going to handle that, or maybe you tested it for that long. I don't know, and you think and it does, but you never know what's going to happen, because how can you test very long out, or yeah, it's just a bunch of different like conditionals that you have to account for. It gets a little messy, and even reading the docs like a handful of times through, and that's just like using Facebook. It has nothing to do with Ember. It's just using something like Facebook.
Yeah.
Even reading the docs so many times through, there's still parts where I'm like, I don't know how they're gonna handle this. Like, so anyway, cool. So we get our access token. It may or may not have publish actions in it. I think I require. Oh, we don't require birthday either, so it's just like a bonus. So now we want to verify, and this is where we are going to hit our callback with this temporary access token that we got, and they're going to authenticate through our whatever authentication library we're using, and then our server is just going to go off and request this long-term token. I have another step right here, which is just specific for like our apps use case. So before I authenticate, I need a bunch of the user data back in order to create that user account, not just authenticate for the first time. So I have to make an API call once I get that temporary access token, get a bunch of data about the user, and then I want to pass it off to my
So you're able to get all that data before you make a network request to get the long-term token?
Yeah.
Through JavaScript?
Yeah, because I have the temporary token. You could even just use the JavaScript SDK to authenticate.
Right.
If you're not doing things like public, well, I think you can even, I don't know how publish actions works with JavaScript SDK, but well, we're doing like publish actions automatically when they interact with the site, and we have custom stories for all of our objects and stuff. So that's why we have it on the server, but you can get away with just the temporary token. And then you would just have temporary token, and if for some reason the token that you had in your app expired, you would just have to go out and request it again from Facebook for a new one. So you could work entirely just with the JavaScript SDK if you wanted to.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, because I have to, when I go and do the long-lived token exchange, I also have to make a separate API request to go and get their
User
email
data.
address and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I can create their account. So I can probably just send that all up in the original authentication set to the API.
Right. So the way that the library that I'm using, that this app was using, is set up is it's expecting that data in order to create the user and then do all the authentication steps to create this authentication identity.
I'll have to see if the Facebook Tory provider allows that, because that's what I'm using.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I've never used the
literally
Tory
just set
provider.
up the short-lived token.
Uh-huh.
It's frustrating. I mean, I can't do those requests in parallel. They're both just sitting there like for 4 seconds.
Uh-huh. So I'm going through the sign up step, but what this Facebook says thing is just a generic authenticating with Facebook. So if they already had a user account with us, if they've already authenticated with Facebook before, we would be verifying that this person is the same as the one that we have. But here, we don't know. We're creating this identity for them for the first time because I'm walking through my sign up logic. So you'd be creating that identity.
Yeah, I mean, like in my authentication logic, I just basically make sure that the Facebook ID that the group has is like the Facebook ID that I have. It's just copy that way.
It's not identity promises.
Yeah.
So I have this extra step, which is also like wrapped in a promise, and I put it in the authenticate method just because it made more sense than the way everything else was wrapped up. So this is the get account attributes, and like I said, this is just going out to Facebook, hitting the me endpoint, which is since we're since you're currently already authenticated, like as far as Facebook's concerned, you already have your app already has the temporary access token. We can now do whatever kind of API calls we want just with the SDK without ever doing anything on our server. The slides are on my website. And then we get this response. I do a little bit more in here because I need to like grab the birth year out of the birthday and handle like if the email's, well the email's not here I'm rejecting, and then my error handles it. But anyway, I do a bunch of stuff in here in my actual app right here. I'm just resolving with the response I get back, and the response you get back is going to be like first name, last name, UID, depending on what permissions you requested. It could have like birthday, location, and so on.
And so if you ask for email permission, why might there not be an email?
Because they could say that they don't want to give email permissions. So this is where I'm
There's another
handling
reason,
that.
actually.
What?
There's another reason.
Why?
Because in developing countries especially, you can sign up for Facebook with a mobile device and never provide an email.
But then you get your Facebook, and you can do that here too. But then you get your Facebook email.
They don't always provide it though. So in some cases you'll actually not be able to provide it.
Even if you
Rewrite-
request email permission and they say yes? Huh.
There's still like, you can't expect that you're going to end up getting an email back.
That's, see, one of those other things where like,
Yeah, you'll
it's
get their
just
Facebook
kind of
email.
annoying.
You can generate those emails from that, right?
You could, but Facebook doesn't always generate emails any longer, so they don't always generate a Facebook mail.
So you can have an
Oh,
you
so
can be
even if you have
authenticated.
their username, like,
You
create
can't
that.
necessarily have it.
And it probably is a different domain per country too.
Cool. Double check then. Yeah, I mean we need an email in order to create a user account,
Yeah.
so it has to be explicit. All right, so then we store that, and this all happens on our server side. I'm not going to get too into the server side code because it really depends on whatever library you're using. And then, so in our case, we're also not only storing that access token, but we're actually like going out and getting this long-term token and storing that on our server side. So we kind of already talked about this in our side conversations throughout this talk, but basically the extended token gives me the ability to, on the server side, publish actions just without the user's knowledge necessarily because they've already given me permissions to their activity feed. And that's not very invasive because it's like kind of subtle in Facebook. The activity feed isn't like, hey, look at me, and we're not doing a lot. Yeah, it wasn't like so-and-so played this on Candy Crush, or once they like mowed their lawn on Farmville or whatever.
You can post things to your.
Right, so yeah. So, well, there's like, now it's not wall, right? There's the activity log, so I can post activity, or I can post to the feed, which I think is their timeline. So it's a little bit different. And the activity log's fine for us because it shows up in that user's friends' feeds. They'll see it, and we aren't very invasive. We're not doing it for a lot of stories. I think there's 6 stories, so 6 scenarios where we will publish an action where, you know, you commented on someone's post, or you created your own post, or you created a profile, like a new profile.
This is in Europe.
This is in my app. So that's where you would want the extended token. So I think I kind of already shared my thoughts about working with Facebook in general. It's a necessary evil, I feel like. It's really useful for growing your user base and cross-promoting your site, so it's definitely worthwhile. I've not worked with Twitter yet. I mean, outside of just like JavaScript stuff, not with like the server piece as well.
Twitter API sucks for
Ever. Email's really important in a lot of apps because that's how you market.
Back to the slide.
Yeah, sure. It
uh,
this one. In this ES6 module syntax we're using, this is how you declare the globals, which we're using throughout. So that's why that's up there. Again, it's just an Ember component. So we've got this get login status, which you saw this piece on its own, and then the get access token, which you saw that piece on its own, and then the get account attributes, which is where we're doing the recall, and then the authenticate, which is where we're requesting the account attributes and actually hitting our callback endpoint and passing that data. And then this is the entry point, which, like the Facebook send dialog one we went through, that's like the entry point. When they click on that button, that action's triggered, and this is where it all starts. So we're going to do the get login status, get access token, authenticate, and these are all promises. So we've got the thens and then the responses if we need them. And then finally, so then this rolls up, right? Once we have authenticated, we've hit our callback, we have all this stuff that we like, we hand it off. So in this case, I hand off this user that just got created. I hand it off, and it gets loaded into my store, and the session's updated, and that's the current user now.
So when you authenticate, at that point you get like I want these permissions, and then when you get the attributes, you're hitting that me input just saying, hey, I want this actual information
About that person.
about that person. Is the FB global, is that what's orchestrating the permissions between the two?
FB Global is just, so if you remember in the initialize step, we set up that we initialized the Facebook SDK. That created that FB, that global, that variable. So this is just saying that we need that variable that was created in the global namespace accessible to this module. So we're using all these Facebook calls. If I did this without the global FB, my JS hint would be like, well, my broccoli build would be like, you're requesting to use Facebook, and that doesn't exist. Like, you don't know what that is.
So how once you have the access token, what actually gives that to the request response to you?
Nothing, because you've already authenticated with Facebook. The Facebook SDK does its own like session stuff.
Okay, so
It's all managed by Facebook.
It
Yeah.
knows that I'm in this domain, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it probably has to do with the app ID. Because when I initialize my Facebook, it
Okay, but either way, you don't even think about it.
Yeah, you don't have to think about it,
Just
just-
gonna be API.
right, which is what I was telling Josh. Like, you could probably get away, or you can get away with using just the JavaScript SDK and never having to hit your own server-side endpoint, which many people do. Like Firebase has something called Simple Auth, which I've used in the past, and it basically hooks up a bunch of different providers, and you can just use it with like one line of code in your app and never have to worry about any kind of server-side authentication of your own. So you can like build a really quick prototype with authentication really fast. And yeah, you don't have any server-side handling at all. It's just all.
Then, I mean, on the very bottom there, you have the actions. So, and then you have the authorize.
Yeah.
So, like essentially what you're saying here is, for this component, I'm going to have some action. That action that has authorize. What actually ties the event of clicking that component to
the action handlebar helper, and I don't have the template for this guy up, but we can look at the send dialog one. So if you see this action right here, this is a handlebars helper, and that triggers that event. If I want to get specific, I can do, so it triggers, so for this example, it triggers the
This one triggers invite.
invite action. So
Okay.
similarly, the
So that
update-
component is aware of actions and there calling the or triggering.
Yeah.
right, so yeah, this is the invite one, but
And
the authenticate one, the template corresponds to the component, and so that template, when something happens, that those events are handled by the component web.
And the fact that that's a handlebar helper is the convention that actions are always handlebar helpers?
Action is a handlebars helper. So Ember handlebars has Ember has a bunch of handlebar helpers that like the link to that we saw, that
Right.
just manage all that for you so you don't have to worry about it, and actions is one of them.
Okay.
And that template is for the context of this component,
Right.
so they're,
Okay.
And then there's that send action too.
and that's something that you get with a component. That's like a method that's available to you when you create an Ember component.
Yeah, I was curious what that's saying. Is that a subset thing? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, so like the component really shouldn't know about the rest of the application, right? Like you can just sort of drop in that component anywhere, and then send action then goes up through the, like it triples up basically.
And it's going to trigger an action on some other component somewhere? Is that what it's saying?
Not on a
Not necessarily, it could be another component.
Like, what am I sending an action to?
So the component is this container, and it lives inside some other template and controller like context, right? So maybe on my site I'm on this sign up page. So sign up is the template, right? And sign up controller would be managing all the JavaScript behaviors for that template. And there's a button on there though, and that's the component, but it lives inside this bigger picture controller. So in that scenario, I'm going to say send action, and so the parent controller would be the first to respond to that action, but it trickles up, so it bubbles up the hierarchy of the controllers. So you can have a bunch of nested controllers and templates. So that's how you get this feel where only this little piece is swapping in and out, but it lives on its own.
And each controller within that hierarchy
Can respond to it. It would
Yeah.
bubble up all the way up to that application scope.
And then if nothing.
And if nothing, if you had your console open, it would say nothing handled the event invite, but nothing errors out. Like as far as the user's concerned, unless they have the dev tools open, they wouldn't even know. Like nothing would happen. So you could handle it anywhere. Open.
So can it only be handled, that's what they only handle the controllers or your main app? Does it trickle back down, or can you register like event listeners with other components to have them interact with something like that?
So components interacting with other components gets messy, but you can do it.
I think you really don't want to though. Like,
Yeah, no, I was just curious, I didn't know how that would work.
I mean,
I've had nested components.
yeah, that's the components make sense.
But that gets
if you
hard
were to
because then
have,
you're
like, a
passing.
component here and a component here, and they're trying to have them talk to each other.
Well, if you wanted them to talk to each other, then you would probably just have attributes available to both of them that exist in the parent, so that they're bound, so that when one component changes that value, it would get updated in both other places.
So it'd
You
be more
would-
in that context.
Yeah, you got to think of things like being bound, but as far as triggering an action from one component to another, that would not.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
wouldn't suggest.
like for example,
that
I've got in this checkout flow that we're doing right now, we've got a card component and an address component because people need stuff shipped to them and they need to have a credit card. And if you're adding a credit card, if you're changing it, the other component will through the bindings at the top level in this controller in the orders/new route that we've got, you'll be able to see the order is being modified currently, and because of that binding, the controller is now aware of it, and the controller will change its state accordingly. So we've got these two changing buttons, and once you click one and are doing behaviors in the one, the other one has the changing button go away, so you can't change them both simultaneously. So you couldn't end up in a state, for example, where
It hasn't been
sense.
pushed to production yet.
Okay, so no.
Yeah, so I was trying to get it pushed to staging yesterday, and then my Travis CI builds were like, oh, hey, it's taking 90 minutes for one build. Did I
That-
tell
was
you
that
about
issue?
this?
Yeah, we were
I
talking
was
about
like,
it.
why?
Did you do the not
I
under
fixed
testing
it.
thing?
No, well, I'm gonna go back and do that because there's a ton of initializers, like as far as like third-party SDKs and stuff that we don't need in testing. So I'm gonna go back and go through all of those and set it up like that,
Awesome.
so that we're not loading all this crap in testing to try and speed up those Travis builds. Because so I found the problem, I fixed it, and now they're back to 11 minutes, which is great. But huh? But it just runs our test suite. So before I push to staging, I need to make sure that like all these merges of all these different features and stuff, that all the testing passes. So for some reason, random reason, I have no idea why, it couldn't possibly be my fault. The build started taking 90 minutes, and that was fun. So I didn't get to it, and then like so many other things came up, and then I decided that I wanted to put, when I do push to production, I want it all to be behind a feature flag, so that like, because it's Facebook, and like this is also like my first rodeo with Facebook since like forever, and I just am not quite sure what to anticipate. So I would like to keep it behind a production feature flag and like test it in production to make sure that everything's good before. So that adds another step, so it's not going to get out as soon as I thought.
So were you asking how many
Users or
users could see what is published?
yeah, like if it's actually
Yeah, like-
working.
Yeah, I mean, like, is it, like, are you getting much benefit from having these, like, publish actions, you know? Just from, like, the perspective of, is it worth all the integration?
Because of the context of the app, I think it will be very useful.
Okay,
The nature of the app that I'm working on is social
right,
on its own. It's a different take on social, and it involves like interests and you know, learning new things and other people teaching things to each other.
nice.
So it's like it leverages like this social community different than Facebook does, but at the same time, if I like when I did have a Facebook, I used to follow my girlfriend who was a personal trainer, and she would always post like recipes and stuff on Facebook.
Right.
Well, you can do that. You can do that on that app. You can post, you can do blog posts, you can post classes, you can go find other people and like have someone teach you how to do yoga
Okay, so
or whatever.
because you might be getting more engagement with stuff. it's
Yeah.
probably gonna-
If I saw that she had like posted a new, if she had posted on Learnable or some new recipe, then I'd be like, I would click on it if it came up in my feed. So that's, and it is, I don't think it's invasive either. It's not going to be like super annoying. It's just going to be like so-and-so like made a new blog post with like the title or whatever, the
Right.
little action says. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so I think it'll be really good. So I do think it's going to be worth it in this scenario. I think sometimes people probably just want to interact with Facebook, like maybe if they, yeah, and it might not necessarily be useful. You
Right,
know?
and Facebook kind of like almost everything that's being done. So
If people don't click on it, yeah, click off or not.
How long would that take?
Well, there was a lot of stuff on the server side with the authentication that had to be done because of the library that the app was using when it started. And just like my understanding of that library, because it's not as like well documented as something like Devise or Tori. It's more of like it was like self-developed. So that was just, you know, it was a fun experience. But it was just a little bit of a time. No, not months, no, weeks. But I wasn't even working full time. So it was like part time, maybe the server piece probably took like 2 weeks part time. So ample of hours. Yeah. Yeah, I mean in hindsight it's short.
And probably with something a little bit more documented too, it would take less time.
Yeah, if I was working with something that I was familiar with, like Devise, for example, I probably could have done it the server side piece in a day.
Yeah,
You know.
so my experience with, like, I had to do server side, I have to do a lot of things that she's doing with the publish actions stuff, but I'm like pulling in everybody's Facebook friends automatically. I've got a worker who does this. Just, I don't even use it right now, but in the event that I will be using it, you know, so it's what you know, like this, say like, oh, I know we'll
think you can get friends anymore. You can?
Yeah.
Oh, you just can't request friends.
Yeah, you can't request
Right.
friends, but I can get their friend IDs, and then I make them follow the people like in the app automatically, which is what like Pinterest does, for example. So every time that like somebody signs up for Pinterest, you follow them, and they follow you automatically. So you've got like the social graph being replicated in your app as it would be on Facebook.
Does it prompt me on Pinterest? Like, do you want to follow your friends on Facebook? Or
It
does it just
does
auto?
now, but it didn't previously.
It just would
So,
automatically.
Yeah, their strategy was like, you're now following whomever, and like they signed up for
Interesting.
Pinterest.
I don't know if I was part of Pinterest or not.
Yeah, that was like a really big part.
Did I have to sign up with Facebook though? 'Cause I tried not to sign up with Facebook.
I don't think you had to originally. I think they always had you know.
Yeah, I've always done that. So maybe
But
that's
I
why.
signed up with Facebook like every single time, like some girl I knew in college or something signs up with Pinterest and it's like, oh my gosh,
Kittens,
you're following
cupcakes,
them.
makeup tutorials.
I was like, wow, Pinterest is way different than it was when I started using it.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's an interesting strategy for like early growth if you want to
Definitely.
do that.
Yeah, I definitely. Thanks, guys.
Cool.
Bye, Internet.